All right, let's get right into it. In this explainer, we're digging into some pretty serious questions raised in a series of critical documents about the Baha'i faith. And it all seems to boil down to two things: cash and covenant. We're talking about claims of massive wealth, complex political connections. It's a lot to unpack.
So, let's kick things off with just one number: 19%. Now, that might not sound like much, but according to the sources we're looking at, this single figure, well, it's the key that unlocks this whole story. It's at the very heart of the financial system we're about to dive into.
So what is this 19%? It's something called hukukula. The name literally translates to the right of God. And the documents we've been analyzing describe it as a mandatory payment, a 19% contribution on whatever a believer considers their excess income. So right away, you can see it's a central pillar of the faith's financial structure.
And that, of course, begs the big question, right? Where does all that money actually go? That's what this is all about. We're going to follow the money, tracing the path laid out in these documents, a path that critics allege is filled with, let's just say, some serious financial questions and claims of absolute control.
Okay, so first things first. To follow the money, you gotta know the plumbing. The source materials lay out a really clear hierarchy, a structure that's seemingly built to funnel funds from the grassroots all the way to the top. And here's how it's said to work. It's like a ladder. An individual believer makes their contribution. From there, it goes up to their local spiritual assembly, the LSA. Then another step up to the National Spiritual Assembly, the NSA. And finally, all of it culminates at the very top, the Universal House of Justice, or UHJ, which is the faith's global headquarters in Haifa, Israel. But the claims don't stop there. The sources allege that this whole structure supports what looks a lot like a paid clergy. They point to officials called counselors who supposedly get, and I'm quoting here, huge amounts for their services. Now that's a big deal, because it kind of flies in the face of the idea that the faith's administration is run by volunteers.
And this really gets to a core theme that keeps popping up in these documents: a supposed black hole of financial transparency. The critics claim that once that money gets to the top, for the average believer who donated it, poof, it's gone. No accountability, no seeing where it went.
All right, so let's move from the system to the people at the top. Because this claim about a lack of accountability isn't just an abstract idea. The documents we've looked at get into some very specific historical allegations against the faith's key leaders. We're talking about accusations of massive personal wealth and some pretty questionable financial dealings.
Yeah, take Shoghi Effendi, the former head of the faith. The source material paints a picture of a man with significant personal wealth. The documents list off some pretty valuable property in Tehran: a garage, a warehouse, multiple houses, and stores. And on top of that, they claim he was pulling in millions of rials every year just from farming on land that he personally owned. All told, he's described as living a lavish lifestyle. Okay, now this is where it gets really interesting. This whole story of personal wealth allegedly gets tangled up with some major geopolitical players, and the sources point to one specific land deal as, well, Exhibit A. Here's the story they tell. Back in the 1880s, the faith's founder, Baha'u'llah, buys up some village land. Fast forward to the 1920s, his successor, Shoghi Effendi, turns around and sells that very same land. And who does he sell it to? The Jewish National Fund. You can see why a transaction like that would raise some eyebrows.
And this land sale, it isn't just a one-off thing, according to these documents. It's presented as just one piece of a much larger global financial puzzle. The sources allege a whole pattern of cozying up to powerful governments and political groups.
I mean, the critics cited in our source material lay out this sprawling web of alleged political ties. They talk about a close relationship with the State of Israel, of course, but also historical backing from the British government, unconditional support from the United States, and even, believe it or not, supposed connections to the Russian state and the alt-right. It's a really wide net.
And what are the perks of these alleged relationships? Well, the documents point to things like this. A pretty major financial benefit. The holy sites on Mount Carmel, the faith's world headquarters in Israel, were apparently exempted from taxes. That's a huge deal.
The plot thickens. The sources also drop a name that links the faith to one of the biggest financial scandals of our time, the Panama Papers. They specifically name Farzam Kamalabadi, a prominent Persian-American Baha'i, as someone whose name popped up in those leaks.
So, okay, we've seen all these allegations. It all comes down to this core conflict, right? How do you even begin to interpret all of this? The sources basically lay out two completely different stories.
It's a clash between spiritual devotion and financial control.
On one hand, you have the idea of a system built on pure faith, believers giving money out of love, out of a genuine commitment to making the world a better place. But then you have the other side, the one presented by critics in these texts. They see an opaque system of financial control, a machine designed to enrich a few at the top and hold on to power. It's a stark contrast.
And according to these sources, you can't really separate the money from the spiritual side of things. They're totally intertwined. This quote here really gets at that, alleging that if you dare to criticize the leadership, especially the supreme body, well, you're not just questioning a decision, you're being critical of the faith itself. And that guilt and fear are supposedly used to keep everyone in line and to keep the money flowing.
So, there you have it. We've walked through the allegations laid out in our source material, from that mandatory contribution to claims of opaque leadership and some pretty serious geopolitical connections. It all leaves us with one final and pretty pointed question to think about. When faith requires a fee, who truly profits?